Database is a collection of different kinds of data. What is the advantage that I have if I use this database system? I have some different terminologies that I have in the relational model. Who invented this relational data model? So guys, EF Code proposed this model. So it's very important concept that all of you should understand. You can create your own views. Hello everyone, I welcome all of you to the first session on Mysql Revision 2.1. So what is that you have done in the last two sessions? You said it is a SQL Revision 2.1 and 2. Yes, guys, that is the syllabus that we have already done in the class 11. I just wanted to give you a recap of all the important things what we have already discussed. So that's why I have coined it as SQL Revision 2.1 and 2. But this is a chapter number 13 that you have in the class 12. So let me start with the first concept. So what is the first concept that I have? I have database. So after discussing that database, so I will be discussing something important about DBMS. So these two topics are very important in this slide that you have to understand. So let me start with the first one. What is database? Database is a collection of heterogeneous data. What is the meaning of it? So heterogeneous in the sense I will be storing all the different types of data, So that's why I will call it as a database. Database is a place where I store a lot of different types of data, That's why I will call it as a heterogeneous data. Fine. So guys, what is DBMS then? Database Management System. Please understand, database management system is a collection of interrelated data. It is a collection of interrelated data. So fine, I have the data in different sources. I want a particular software, I want a particular application which will help me to deal or to retrieve or to store this data. I want a software, I want an application to handle all this data. So that software is what I will call it as a DBMS. DBMS is nothing but database management system. Database management system is a software which will, or it is an application which will help me to deal with the data what I have stored in the database or in the different data sources. That is what you have to understand. What is database? Database is a collection of different kinds of data. DBMS is a software which will help me to handle with the data that I have stored in different data source. What is the meaning of data source? The meaning of data source in the sense I can also call it as a database. I can store my data in different databases. So all these things will be handled by an application called DBMS. So DBMS is a software which will help me to handle this data. So fine, I got the fair idea about database and also I got the fair idea about database management system. So what is the next topic that I have? Advantages of database system. Why should I use this database system? That is very important that all of you should understand. The first point that you should understand is it reduces the data redundancy. What is the meaning of data redundancy? Repetition of data. It will avoid the repetition of data. What is the meaning of it, sir? Imagine I have to write my details in the register book. So imagine after 3 to 4 hours, after doing a lot of work, I will forget that I have already written my information in the registration book. So I will think that I have to write it one more time. So in the first page I have already written, but I have forgotten that I have written, and in the third page I will write it one more time. So the data, whatever I have written in the first page, the same data I will write it in the next one more page. So the same data, it is repeated. So guys, this is what I will call it as a redundancy. Suppose in case if I am using the database, so this redundancy will not be there. The data redundancy will not be there. That is the first advantage that we have. What is the second one that I have? Controls the data inconsistency. Controls the data inconsistency. What is the meaning of inconsistency? Can you all tell me what exactly the meaning of inconsistency? Imagine I'm just writing the student details. I'm just writing student details, okay? I'm just asking, so whether they have, I just want the information with respect to the result. Let's imagine I'm just writing the student ID and then result, okay? So here what happens is, I'll ask the student number 1, student ID who has got the student ID as 1. So I'll ask the result. He will just say pass. He will just say pass. So I'll ask student number 2 whose ID is 2. I'll ask him, so what is the result? He will just say 82%. He will say 82%. I'll ask one more student, so whose ID is 3. He will just say second class. He will just say second class. So please understand the concept, whatever I'm storing, the data, whatever I'm storing, so it is not in same format. It is not in the same format. Here it is just saying pass or fail. Here it is saying in terms of percentage. Here it is saying in terms of class. There is no consistency in the data. If I'm storing the result, I should just write pass or fail, pass or fail. If I'm storing the result, I should store either in percentage, but I'm not doing like that. So there is no consistency in my data. So how do I evaluate it? So that is the point that you have to understand. So guys, if I'm using the database, this problem will not be there. There will be a consistency in the data. That is what you have to understand in the second point. What is the third point that I have? Database facilitate sharing of data. Probably you would have come across with this results. When it comes to the concept of examination results, do you think that your result sheets are shared among multiple servers? No, it is shared in one server and multiple people can view that result at the same time. So that concept I can give you as an example for this point, that is, it facilitates the sharing of data. I will be sharing the one copy of the data with multiple people. Multiple people can access the same data at the same time. That is possible with the help of database. That is possible with the help of database. What is the next point that I have? It enforces the standards. It enforces the standards. What is the meaning of standards? For example, I'll ask you to store the date of birth, right? Let me just take one more example. I'll ask you to store the date of birth. So when it comes to the date of birth, some of the people will just write, DDMM YYYY format. Okay. Some of the people will give me MMDD and YY format. So this problem will not be there if I use the concept of database. It will enforce some standard, so I have to follow the same standard to store my data. I have to follow the same standard to store the data. That is very, very important. So what is the next one that I have? Integrity can be maintained throughout the database. What is the meaning of integrity? What exactly the meaning of integrity? Let me just explain this in detail. What exactly the concept of integrity? Please understand. Integrity in the sense, so guys, I have something in this. So this is one table. This is one table. Imagine this is one more table. So this is table number 1 and this is table number 2. This is table number 1 and this is table number 2. Let's imagine this is in this table number 1, I'm just storing the student info. I'm just storing the student info. In table number 2, I'm just trying to store the marks of the students. I'm just trying to store the marks of the students. So what happens is, here I have student ID. I have student ID and I have student information. Here I'm trying to store the marks of this students, right? Let's imagine I have student ID as 001. Here I have 001. So if I say 001, it should be Ravi. Let us imagine 001 belongs to Ravi. 001 belongs to Ravi. So if I say 001, it should belongs to Ravi. Whatever the marks here I enter, it should belongs to Ravi. So please understand my example. Here I don't have 002, but if I try to enter 002, the marks for 002, I don't know who is 002. I have not stored any information with respect to 002. So this will violate. This leads to an error. Why? Because this is a parent table. This is a child table of this parent table. So first I have to create the student record. Then I have to enter the marks. Suppose if I don't have the student, I cannot enter the marks for the student. So this is possible with the help of database. That is what I will call it as a referential integrity. So all these things are the advantages that I have if I use database. So moving on to the next concepts. What is the next topic that I have? Relational data model. Who invented this relational data model? So guys, EF Code proposed this model. What exactly this relational data model is all about? Yes. So we guys used to understand, right? So if I just write like this, what do you treat this as? This is what we call it as a table. But when it comes to the concept of relational data model, I will not call this as table. Instead, I will call this as relation. That is the first point that you should understand when it comes to the relational data model. What is the second point that I have? A row in the table represents the relationship. What do you call it as row? So this is what I will call it as a row. This row will represent the relationship among the set of values. So here I will be storing the values. So guys, this row represents the relationship among the set of values whatever I have inside this row. That is what you have to understand. So this table, I will call it as a relation. So this row, whatever I have, so in this row I have some set of values. This row will depict the relationship between the set of values what I have. So that is the second point that you have to understand. The third point that you have to understand is, as a table is a collection of relationships. What is the meaning of it? So each row I will treat it as a relationships. So the table is a collection of rows. So table is a collection of relationships. That is, relation is a collection of relationships. So generally it is referred using mathematical term. That is relation. So since I have different relationships, it has got a collection of relationships. That's why I will call it as a relation with the reference of mathematical term. That is what you have to understand. So in short, what is that I have to understand in this entire slide? So only one thing. So if I say the word in relational data model, that is table, so you will not be calling that as a table. Instead, you will be calling that as a relation. That's what you have to understand. Why do I call it as a relation? Because each row you will have a set of values. Each set of values will have the relationship. That's why I will have a collection of relationships inside the relation. That's why I will call that as a relation. That's what you have to understand at this point of time. Moving on to the next one. So guys, different terms that I have in the relational model. I have some different terminologies that I have in the relational model. Let me just discuss one by one. What is relation? That I have already discussed. Relation is the table. Instead of calling that as a table, I will call that as a relation. That is what you have to understand. What is the next one that I have? Domain. Domain. Please understand. Imagine I have a table. Okay. So in this table, so the table name is student. What is the name of the table? Student. So here I have SID. SID, and I have name, right? I have name, and then I have age. So guys, I'm trying to explain, I'm trying to give you the example for domain now. Look at the example now. 1, 2, 3, 4. So A, B, C, D, and D, E. 18, 20, 19, 20. So this set of values that I have in the column, the set of values that I have in this one column is what I will call it as a domain. This set of values that what I have inside the column is what I will call it as a domain. Please observe, this is one domain, this is one domain. So guys, the set of values that I have in the column is what I would call it as a domain. That is what you have to understand with respect to the domain. What is the next one that I have? Tuples. Sir, this row, this is what I will call it as a row, right? This is what I will call it as a row. This row is nothing but tuples. The another name for the row is what I will call it as a tuples and relations. You got my point? So another name for the row is what I will call it as a tuples. That is what you have to understand. So moving on to the next one, attributes. The column name what you have in the table, right? So let me just write one more time. SID. So name, age. So guys, this is what I will call it as a attribute. The column name what you have, this is what I will call it as a attributes. So please understand, the column name is what I will call it as a attribute. So what is the next one that I have? Degree. Please understand. So degree and cardinality, you need to understand this very clearly. What is the meaning of degree? The number of attributes. The number of attributes. How many number of attributes that I have? I have 3. The number of attributes that I have, that is what I will call it as a degree. The number of attributes that I have in a relation is what I will call it as a degree. So please understand here, what is cardinality? The number of records, that is the number of tuples that I have. The number of tuples that I have is what I will call it as a cardinality. I will repeat for all of you. The number of attributes. The number of attributes that I have. The number of columns that I have. So that is what I will call it as a degree. The number of rows. The number of rows is what I will call it as a cardinality. That is what you have to understand. Moving on to the next one. What is the next one that I have? Views. What exactly is this views? Imagine I have a table. Imagine I have a table, or I can also call it as a relation. So I will take the virtual copy of this. I will take the virtual copy of this relation. I can also call this view as a subset of this relation. I will also call this view as a subset of this relation. Please understand, I have a table. I have a table. I will take the copy, virtual copy of this table. This is what I will call it as a view. But understand, whatever the changes that I do for this table, this changes will not be reflected to the original table. This will not be reflected to the original table. So this view is a virtual copy of this main relation or main table. Imagine I have a document and I will take the photocopy of it. I have a document and I will take the photocopy of it. If I do any changes, if I write on that photocopy, that will not reflect on the main document. That is what you have to understand. So this copy is what I will call it as a view. This copy is what I will call it as a view. So when it comes to the view, you can create your own views. Imagine I have my table. In that table, I have 50 columns. But I don't want the entire 50 columns. I can customize. Suppose I want only 10 columns. In my view, I can just create only 10 columns. I can select only 10 columns of this table. Whatever the changes that I do in this view, this will not reflect to this table, the original table. That's what you have to remember when it comes to the concept of views. What is the second one that I have in the slide? Primary key. Very important thing. Please understand, I have a table. Let's write like this. I have a table. So what is that I have? I have a table. So in this table, I have columns. That is SID, name, age, right? So here, this SID, I will treat it as primary key. This SID, I will treat it as primary key. What is this primary key? First thing it should come to your mind if I say something about primary key is, first point, it should not be null. It should not be null. What is the meaning of it should not be null, sir? Suppose if I am trying to store the value, I cannot leave this place empty. I cannot leave this place empty. That is the first point. that you should remember when it comes to the concept of primary key. What is the second point that I should remember? Whatever the value that you are trying to store here, if this is primary key, that should be unique. That should be unique. What is the meaning of unique? So that value, whatever you have stored here, that should not be repeated in the entire column. That should not be repeated in the entire column. That is the two important points that you should remember when it comes to the concept of primary key. That's all about the primary key. Now, the last topic in this slide is candidate key. Please understand all the attributes, that is all the attribute combinations inside a relation, all the attribute combinations inside the relation can serve as a primary key. Then serve as a primary key are candidate keys. Are candidate keys. They are candidate keys for the primary key position. What is the meaning of it, sir? Can you explain that? What is the property of primary key? It should not be null, it should be unique. Imagine I have more than one column which satisfies these two conditions. This is satisfying the rules of primary key. Fine. Even this column is also satisfying the concept of not null and uniqueness, and even this is also satisfying the not null and uniqueness. So guys, this is what the combination of attributes along with the primary key, I will call these keys as a candidate keys. These keys as a candidate keys. That is what you have to remember. Moving on to the next one. What is alternate key? What is alternate key? Please understand carefully. A candidate key that is not primary key. A candidate key that is not primary key is what I will call it as an alternate key. So guys, can I call this as a candidate key? Can I call this as a candidate key? Yes. But these candidate keys are not primary keys. These two candidate keys are not primary keys. So this I will call it as a alternate keys. This I will call it as a alternate keys. Hope you got the idea. Is moving on. I have something called foreign key. I have something called foreign key. What is this foreign key? Imagine I have two tables, that is two relations, right? I have T1 and I have T2. So here I have SID. So SID is a primary key. SID is a primary key in the table 1. Listen here carefully, right? So here I have MID. So MID is a primary key of this table. MID is a primary key of T2 table. SID is a primary key of T1 table. So fine, if I use SID again here, so primary key of T1 table, I am using it in the T2. So here SID will become the foreign key. SID will become the foreign key. That is what you have to understand. The primary key of one table will act as a foreign key in other table. So that is what I will call it as a foreign key. That is what I will call it as a foreign key. That's what you have to understand when it comes to the concept of foreign keys. So guys, with this I have come to the end of this session. So hope I have tried to give you the basic knowledge about what is database and what is database management system, what is relational data model, and different terminologies that we use in the relational data model is what I have discussed in this session. So by saying this, please take care of your health, stay healthy, stay safe. Thank you. Bye bye.